Hello and welcome to another episode of the SureTech Podcast, InfoSec with the Three Hacketeers. My name is Sid and I'm joined by Jose, Josh, and Crane. And today we are going to be discussing a recent incident, a security incident here locally for us. When I say us, Jose and I, it's in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. A water facility was recently hacked, and we're just going to discuss and talk about it today. And Jose, go ahead and take it away and share the details of what exactly happened.
So the Aliquippa Water Treatment Facility just recently was infiltrated, I guess you could say, by an unauthorized personnel via a PLC, programmable, sorry guys, logic controller device, which is basically a device that runs the water treatment facility machinery. They were able to get into the water treatment facility device via a password, a non-secure default password that was that came up. It's 111. So they didn't have to work very hard because 1111 would probably be something that I would try if I couldn't get into something just in general, like maybe 111, maybe 444. Not sure why I picked 444, but you get the gist. Like, it's a real simplistic password. It's a default password that device was that came default from the manufacturer. So bottom line is, once they were able to get into the PLC device, then they were able to navigate the rest of the network inside of the water treatment facility. Luckily, cutting to the end of the story, luckily, from what is gathered and understood at this point, they weren't able to manipulate any of the water treatment chemicals, so no harm was done to any human. However, just in general, and the fact that they were able to hack the plant is cause for concern. It basically just points out the fact that Aliquippa, PA is a very small town. Like, it's not huge. The facility, I believe, was servicing up to 7,000 people. So that's not a very large amount of humans, but it just basically pinpoints that you don't have to be in a major city or a major power plant or a major distribution point in order to be in the line of fire when it comes to state-sponsored hacking. From what we understand and what we gather, there's still information coming in, so I'm not 100% sure, and neither is anybody else. But it's thought that it was a group that was connected to a group that was hacking water facilities in Israel. And the company that provided the PLC, the programmable logic controller, it's an Israeli company. And so whomever hacked into the system already knew that the PLC's default password was 1111 because they had already done it before. So, long story short, it just, to me, I actually wrote about it in our blog. To me, it just solidifies the fact that you don't have to be large to be infiltrated, to be pinpointed or on the radar for these guys to attack, because it's just it's not a necessary thing. And so, yeah, it's just one of those things where the PLC device, it's probably something that's overlooked because it's not really a computer, so to speak, but it's on the network. And so it's just, it's a device that needs to be as secure as all the other stuff that you secure, with better passwords. I'm not sure exactly what kind of password you could implement, but 1111 is probably not the one you want to be utilizing. So, in this scenario, a catastrophic event was evaded, but it still, like I said, shows that it's possible that any little plant, any infrastructure in the United States is susceptible to being hacked by outside entities. Josh, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I hesitate to call them IoT, Internet of Things devices, but that's really what these PLCs are, right? It's not a computer with a monitor attached to it running, Windows. So you're right. People tend to just not think about these things. But more and more, that's what we're seeing are the targets of attacks. And I'm curious. We'll probably never find out the details, but I'm curious, was that PLC exposed to the wider internet? Was it, did it have a public-facing IP, or did they have to breach the network to get to it?
No, it was public facing.
Yeah.
In a CISA article that I read just a few days ago, they determined that it was actually a public facing device. So it wasn't even that complicated to maneuver into.
No, I mean, that's just knocking on the front door. 11111. Hey, I'm in. That's the kind of thing that really every organization needs to take the time. I know I talk about this all the time about data flow diagrams, network diagrams, asset inventories, uncovering the default password on a public-facing Internet of Things device that's not behind the firewall. That's what all that documentation is supposed to help you uncover. So you see it, you get eyes on it, and then you realize, or your IT professional realizes, hey, we got to do something with this. At least make the password 1234, right? I mean, maybe there's a business reason it has to.
I think 1234 is just as well as 1111.
I know it is. It is.
I'm not exactly sure. They haven't released, and as as per usual, I'm sure not everything's going to be released, but I'm just wondering what the complexity of a password on a PLC device can be. Is it all numerical? Is it alphanumerical? Like, what's the limitation with that? Because if it's numerical and it's front facing and it's only 4 digits, I mean, the potential of brute forcing that device and figuring out the password, even with 4 digits, is pretty. It's more attainable.
Yeah, there's no firewall there, so it's it's just out there. It's unlikely you're even going to get dinged for 30 minutes for doing 3 wrong password attempts, and even then, 3 wrong password attempts, 4 digits, 1,000 passwords. Yeah, you get there eventually. But I'm not trying to.
What's your mathematical? What's the percentages of it?
If you get
or how many combinations can there be?
4 digits. I'd have to look it up. But it's a lot. But computers nowadays, they can run a lot. And these default passwords, that any device that has a default password, I don't have to go on the darknet. I can go on Google and I can find the default passwords for routers, IoT, like everything. And some, that device is probably wired, but even you got wireless devices now. You got wireless IoT devices that'll be out in the field, right? For like a manufacturer or oil and gas guy. It's just out in the field. You're not going to run a wire to it. It's going to run wirelessly. So it's out there. It's on its own. It's got to be protected. If you leave it with the default password or a weak password, someone's gonna break into it.
That's actually bringing up a strategically speaking, obviously critical infrastructure it's the most important, I think, homeland security initiative there should be, because everything is connected, and if a threat actor wants to cause havoc, that's the easiest way to do it, right? I mean, it's happened already in small spurts. You think about the pipeline that was attacked just recently, a few years ago, where that pipeline, Colonial Pipeline, shutting down that pipeline cost not just the business, not just the private and the private sector, but it cost the American people tons of money and time because that pipeline had to be shut down for 10 or 11 days for them to be able to facilitate getting everything back up and running. And that, that there, I think, brings another point. Another point I wanted to review is, you need to be prepared for these things. It's not just enough to be secure. You need to know what you have, what your threat landscape looks like, and how you're going to react when it does happen, because I don't think it's going to be over. I think it's going to be worse. It's going to get worse. And as machines get faster, as computers get faster, you have all kinds of different artificial intelligence coming down the road here where, the bad guys can actually utilize it to their advantage. We're living in a world where kinetically speaking, I mean, yeah, everybody, people can lob missiles and whatever else at us, but the easier way to cause havoc and, the people of a country to get nervous is, taking their power out for a few days or weeks. It's not necessarily, you don't think of it as, as dangerous. Obviously, it's not a nuke coming at you, but it's definitely, something that can knock you back into the Stone Ages for a few weeks or months, however long it takes you to come back to normality.
Yeah, and just to go back for a minute to the connected devices, because I hear a lot of people that just aren't convinced that it's as big an issue as it is. I'm just gonna in a non industrial example, a commercial example. I bought a new stove recently. So it's very fancy. It is a smart stove. You can connect it to your network, and it has a wireless network card, and there's an app, and I can look at the food cooking in my stove on my app. There's no camera, but I can see like what temperature it is, how long it's been running. I can turn it off and on my phone. Great commercial thing, right? Except I'm a paranoid risk assessor, right? So I disabled that. So where am I going with the story? That stove and my father-in-law's refrigerator, right? They just broadcast a wireless network. They're just out there connected, and they come with a default password. And yeah, it's longer than 4 digits. And I looked it up. 4 digits gives you 10,000 combinations, which for modern computing, doing millions a second is nothing. So
yeah,
they
computations. I mean,
yeah. So they've got whatever password it is there. And you look at the password and you're like, oh, this default password looks secure. No, it isn't, because you go online, you Google the model number, the model of that stove, and default passwords, and they're right there. This isn't even the dark net. Like, you don't need to go to the dark net for this stuff. This stuff's just out there. The security mindedness, and this is how some organizations, not you listeners, because you guys listen to this podcast, so you guys are ahead of the curve, they don't think that maybe somebody wouldn't want their stove to be broadcasting a network. And you can't change the password, right? Like, it just is, because it's a stove, right? Like, you still can screen and manipulate it, right? That's not how it works. So I'm like, I'm going to turn this off, right? The instruction manual doesn't tell you how to turn off the network, how to disconnect it, because why would you want that? Again, you go to Google, you find the code to put it in. It was a very complicated process. It took me, a reasonably sophisticated technology person, like 20 minutes to turn off my stove's Wi-Fi. Okay, it's a stove, right? What can you do? Well, and you can go on Google, you can look this up, and I'm not just talking out of my rear end here. You could, if you really hated somebody and they had one of these stoves, you could burn their house down. You can connect to it, you can crank it up, and you can override the settings, make it crank out. I think it has a clean setting, so it maxes out at 600, 800 degrees, something like that. And you can start a fire and burn somebody's house down through their internet connected stove. So I know we talk about this a lot. And I just, that's not an industrial example. It's a residential example, but it's the same thing. It's in your business, or maybe it's in your house. Maybe you have a smart house and everything's connected. At least you want to have a firewall there. And the same thing, those firewalls, they'll have default passwords. You got to change the default passwords because they're all known. For the tech guys out there, about data dictionary attacks where you just run a list of known passwords against the target. It's very, very fast. They exist for default passwords for every device.
First thing you should do is when you take those routers or extenders or whatever else you're connecting to your network is make sure that you change the password. Figure out how to do it and change it. I have some new cameras around my house now on the outside of it, and they're all Wi-Fi connected. And honestly, at first, I've never really wanted to do that because I've never really trusted that kind of stuff. And because, as Josh stated, we're security guys, and any little connection to the network means just another thing we need to protect ourselves from. But in this case, it was necessary. There have been some little tiny things going on around these neighborhoods, and we wanted to make sure that if there was something that happened, that we'd have a camera in order to in order to go back to if we needed. First thing I did when I opened those things up, they're all, it's not, ADT didn't come out here. It's called Simple Safe, and Simple Safe is like basically a, do-it-yourself system. So as soon as I took it out, look at the manual, figure out how to change the default gateway, default passwords on them, and that's the first thing I did. Like that's the first thing you do when you first open up something, and it's the same thing everywhere. And going back to what we were talking about earlier with the PLC device, I know it's complicated sometimes and it's overlooked, but I think it's about time. It's been a while now where people, companies and businesses have been under attack. It's time to start paying attention to those little details too, and if you're not going to do it, then, at some point or another, something's going to force you to do it. And usually if you've been forced, that means that you've probably had to go through something that you didn't need to go through if you just would have changed that password at the beginning. So I'm not saying it's not just the only thing you need to do, but it's the bare minimum that needs to be done when you're talking about IoT devices.
Yeah, more and more I see IoT is, I don't think it's even a hot take anymore, that IoT is just the next frontier in hacking. It seems more and more attacks are related to IoT devices. It's been a trend for several years now.
Yeah, it's either IoT or it's social engineering. It's either one of those two. And both are preventable. One by what we're talking about here, and two by training, making sure people understand and have the proper behaviors towards people spear phishing or doing all those other things, the social engineer, calling, texting, all that stuff. So both of those major contributors to intrusions nowadays can be mitigated by pretty simple steps.
Yeah, and you're on the mitigation step now. Even just in the example you just gave of the Aliquippa water attack, they detected it, right, fairly rapidly, and they had a fallback. They had an incident response plan for it.
They went manual.
Yeah, they had a plan, or at least an SOP, standard operating procedure. That's what saved. I mean, that could have been a huge incident. Instead, it's a cautionary tale as opposed to everyone got poisoned water. 7,000 people got poisoned. And that's something I know, Jose, you talk about this all the time. I talk about it all the time. You got to have the plan for when something goes wrong, that you detect it, respond, mitigate it as quickly as possible. The faster you mitigate one of these breaches, the smaller the story is.
Sid has left the chat. The moderator is gone. So now we have to moderate ourselves, Josh.
Oh, we're going off script now. The three Hacketeers unplugged.
I wanted to add in one more thing.
Oh, he's back.
Shoot.
You guys are talking about how IoT devices are becoming more and more something that people are attacking. You know, it's interesting that certain routers are coming built in with a guest network, or, you know, we've already seen routers come built in with a guest network, but we're seeing routers coming now built in with an IoT network that has different security parameters so that you can connect all of your IoT devices to that specific network. Something funny about IoT devices is I've set them up over the years for myself and other clients is most IoT devices just want to work off of a 2.4 gigahertz network. And so, you know, if you have a router or Wi-Fi that wants to combine the 2.4 and the 5, sometimes those IoT devices can have some trouble. And so it's cool that again, these routers and devices are coming built in with IoT networks and IoT networks that specifically just stay on a 2.4 band.
Yeah, but you got to use it. How often do people
Exactly.
not even use it?
Exactly. That's where my next step was going with this. As you are interested in your own home's security, your business security, if you're going to use IoT devices, I highly recommend having a separate IoT network. You can do it with all business routers. You can create multiple networks and put various security parameters on them. But even with home routing devices, you can do the same thing.
It sounds like we're going off the rails, but I mean, this is the kind of thing. The more connected society gets, you know, the more you got to think about these things. You know,
We're so vulnerable.
I was talking with the gentleman just the other day. They were getting their new fancy internet service provider hooked up with their faster internet, and I was joking with him about, you know, the internet superhighway, which nobody calls it the internet, the internet superhighway or information superhighway. We don't use that name anymore. And I think part of that, this is going to tie in, I promise. Part of that is because the internet's no longer like a highway where there's just exits. It's like a neighborhood. It's like suburbia or a city where anybody can get into anywhere. So it's not like it used to be where there was distance, metaphorical distance between somebody who wants to attack you and yourself. Now, because of the way everything is so connected, you can't say I don't live in a bad neighborhood because I physically don't live in a bad neighborhood, right? Like the internet's just full of bad neighborhoods and you got to have good locks because
Woo!
it's
I'm
not
use that, Josh.
It's not on the super highway anymore where people can't get you. You're driving, you know, you think you're safe because you're in a nice neighborhood in real life, but you're driving through rough neighborhood, you know.
You don't want to name any neighborhoods, do you?
I mean, where I live, I'm far away from rough neighborhoods. I'm in farm country.
Well, yeah. And Josh, that is, like I said, I'm going to use that moving forward here. But so on point. There is no good neighborhood. It's all intermingled into one, and every neighborhood has a bad situation happening. And you just gotta put good locks on, put an alarm system on your house, cameras like I have, and make sure that you're doing your best to protect yourself and everybody else that's connected to you.
Yeah, you gotta be like one of those fancy fancy New York apartment buildings with the doorman. I don't know you. You can't come in.
Yep.
You got an invitation? I got to call somebody. That's
Yeah.
That's how you want your IT working.
That's exactly right. Man, you're on the ball today, Josh.
I woke up early and drank a lot of coffee.
Oh, shoot. Where the hell's the moderator? He's letting us go off the rails here.
This is what's just required sometimes.
He's just enjoying it. All right. See, Jose, your water's safe to drink, though? They got it all fixed?
Yeah, water's good. I use a filter system.
Are you? Yeah. You know, it's funny. I used to live in Aliquippa.
I know.
We didn't have the Aliquippa water. We had the other one.
Hopewell, weren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, we had Crestmont.
Yep.
So when I heard this, I was thinking about my old neighborhood.
Yeah, man.
Which Hopewell, Aliquippa, it's not a bad neighborhood. But
no,
you still got to have locks.
That's right. Oh my gosh, Josh, that is so well said. After all the things that you said earlier, right there, you got to have a good lock, man. Because the super highway of the internet is no longer. And everything that's on the internet is susceptible to being hacked. You got to have good security.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the SureTech Podcast. If you found value in what you listened to today, please give us a like. Do follow us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. In the description, there will be a link tree that will take you to our social media pages, and you can keep up with us on your favorite social media platform. If you'd like to get in touch with us here at SureTech, please email us at info@sure-technologies.com, which is also in the description. Thanks again, and see you on the next one.